Welcome to Lesson 7.3 of the Grant Architect course. In this lesson, we explore summative evaluation, the type of evaluation that assesses whether programs achieve their intended outcomes. While formative evaluation asks whether we are implementing well, summative evaluation asks whether the program works. Summative evaluation addresses the fundamental question funders want answered: did the investment produce results? This is the evaluation type most people think of when they hear the word evaluation. It focuses on outcomes and impact rather than process and implementation. Summative evaluation findings inform decisions about program continuation, replication, and scaling. Effective summative evaluation requires careful design, appropriate methods, and realistic expectations about what can be concluded. By the end of this lesson, you will understand the purpose and methods of summative evaluation, different designs for assessing outcomes, and how to present credible summative evaluation plans in proposals. What is summative evaluation and how does it differ from formative assessment approaches? Summative evaluation focuses on program outcomes and results rather than implementation processes. It assesses whether the program achieved what it intended to accomplish and whether changes in participants or conditions can be attributed to the intervention. The timing of summative evaluation typically occurs at the end of a program or at defined endpoints during longer programs. This timing allows outcomes to manifest before assessment. Some outcomes require time to appear. Measuring too early may miss effects that develop later. The purpose is judgment rather than improvement. Summative evaluation determines whether the program worked rather than how to make it better. This judgment orientation provides accountability to funders and stakeholders who want to know whether their investment produced results. Key questions addressed by summative evaluation include whether participants improved on targeted outcomes, whether changes can be attributed to the program rather than other factors, how large the effects were, and whether different participants experienced different effects. These questions focus on outcomes and impact. Summative evaluation serves external audiences, including funders, policymakers, and other stakeholders who make decisions based on program effectiveness evidence. Quantitative approaches provide breadth of coverage, statistical precision, and comparability across contexts and time. They enable testing hypotheses about relationships and differences. They support generalization from samples to populations when sampling is appropriate. They provide numeric benchmarks for accountability and tracking progress. However, they may miss nuance, context, and unexpected phenomena that qualitative approaches can capture. Key summative evaluation questions focus on results. Effectiveness asks whether the program achieved intended outcomes. Did participants change as expected? Were targets met? This is the core summative question. Impact asks what broader changes resulted. Beyond individual participants, what community or system changes occurred? Impact extends beyond direct effects. Efficiency asks whether outcomes were achieved at reasonable cost. What was the cost per outcome? Could the same results be achieved more economically? Value for money matters. Sustainability asks whether effects will persist after the program ends. Do changes last? Will benefits continue? Sustainability indicates durable impact. Sample size determination requires balancing statistical considerations with practical constraints. Statistical power represents the probability of detecting an effect if one truly exists. Underpowered studies risk false negative conclusions where real effects go undetected. Key factors affecting required sample size include the minimum effect size you want to detect, the variability in your outcome measures, the statistical significance level you will use, and the power level you want to achieve. Effect size represents the magnitude of change you consider meaningful. Smaller effects require larger samples to detect reliably. Variability in outcomes also increases required sample size, since more variation means more noise obscuring the signal. Most evaluations aim for 80% power with a significance level of 0.05. Power analysis calculators and statistical software can determine required sample sizes for various designs. When ideal sample sizes are not feasible, acknowledge power limitations and interpret null findings cautiously. Randomized controlled trials provide the strongest evidence for causal attribution when feasible and ethical. Random assignment creates equivalent groups differing only by chance at baseline. If outcome differences emerge after intervention, they are attributable to the intervention rather than pre-existing differences between groups. Randomization requires sufficient sample size to achieve balance across known and unknown confounders. Small randomized samples may have substantial imbalance despite randomization. Block randomization and stratification can improve balance on key variables. Ethical concerns limit randomization when withholding treatment causes harm or when equipoise does not exist. Practical concerns limit randomization when participants resist assignment or contamination between groups is likely. When randomization is feasible, proper implementation matters enormously. Allocation concealment prevents selection bias. Intent to treat analysis preserves randomization benefits. Attrition threatens internal validity if differential by group. Evaluation design options offer different levels of rigor. Experimental design uses random assignment to treatment and control groups. Randomization creates equivalent groups, enabling causal inference. This is the gold standard, but often impractical. Quasi-experimental design uses comparison groups without randomization. Natural comparison groups or matched samples provide counterfactual evidence, less rigorous than random assignment but often feasible. Pre-post design measures the same participants before and after. Change from baseline indicates program effect, but other factors may explain change. Post-only design measures outcomes only after program completion. Without baseline, attributing change to the program is difficult. This is the weakest design. Pre-post designs compare outcomes before and after intervention, but cannot attribute changes to the program since other factors may explain changes. Adding comparison groups strengthens causal inference. Single group pre-post designs are common due to feasibility, but represent weak evidence for program effects. Acknowledge design limitations when interpreting and reporting results from pre-post studies without comparison groups. Selecting outcome measures requires balancing several criteria. Validity asks whether the measure captures the intended outcome. If you want to measure job readiness, does your measure actually assess job readiness? Face validity and construct validity matter. Reliability asks whether measurement is consistent. Would the same person score similarly on repeated measurement? Would different raters score similarly? Consistency matters. Sensitivity asks whether the measure can detect change. If participants improve, will your measure show it? Ceiling and floor effects limit sensitivity. Feasibility asks whether you can actually collect this data. Some ideal measures are impractical. Balance rigor with feasibility. Survey design requires attention to question wording, response options, and overall instrument structure. Question wording should be clear, concise, and unambiguous. Avoid double-barreled questions that ask about two things at once. Avoid leading questions that suggest preferred answers. Use language appropriate for respondent literacy and cultural context. Response options should be mutually exclusive and exhaustive. Rating scales should have consistent direction throughout the survey. Consider including a neutral midpoint or not depending on whether forcing a direction is appropriate. Instrument structure affects response quality significantly. Begin with easier, less sensitive questions to build rapport. Group related questions together logically. Place demographic questions at the end unless they are needed for skip logic. Keep surveys as short as possible while covering essential content. Pilot testing with representatives of the target population identifies problems before full implementation. Baseline data establish the starting point against which change is measured, a critical element of summative evaluation design. Without knowing where participants started, you cannot determine whether they improved. Pre-post designs compare baseline measures to follow-up measures. Participants are assessed before the program begins and again after completion. Change from baseline to follow-up indicates program effects, though without a comparison group, attributing change specifically to the program is challenging. Baseline timing should occur before program exposure begins. If baseline assessment happens after participants have already engaged with the program, you may miss some effects that occur early. Early planning for baseline data collection ensures you capture the true starting point. Baseline measures should match outcome measures exactly. If you want to know whether knowledge improved, measure knowledge at baseline and follow up using the same instrument. Inconsistent measures make change assessment impossible. Baseline challenges include participant attrition between baseline and follow-up, ceiling and floor effects that limit room for change, and testing effects where the active assessment influences later responses. Anticipate and address these challenges in your evaluation design. Quasi-experimental designs provide causal evidence when randomization is not feasible while acknowledging greater threats to internal validity than true experiments. Comparison group designs compare outcomes for participants receiving the intervention to similar individuals not receiving it. Without randomization, groups may differ systematically at baseline, which confounds outcome comparisons. Strategies to strengthen comparison group designs include careful matching on key characteristics, statistical control for baseline differences, and assessing and reporting baseline equivalence. Interrupted time series designs examine outcome trends before and after intervention introduction. Changes in level or slope coinciding with intervention suggest impact. Multiple pre-intervention observations establish the baseline trend. Multiple post-intervention observations assess whether changes persist. Threats include other events coinciding with intervention that might explain changes. Reporting summative findings effectively communicates what you learned about program outcomes to audiences who need this information. Clear reporting maximizes the value of your evaluation investment. Results organization typically begins with description of who participated and how, followed by findings for each evaluation question or outcome measure. Organize results to match your evaluation questions for clarity. Quantitative findings should include both statistical significance and effect size information. Tables and figures can display results efficiently. Describe findings in plain language accessible to non-technical audiences while providing technical details for those who need them. Qualitative findings should be organized thematically with illustrative quotes providing evidence for interpretive claims. Balance between breadth of themes and depth of illustration. Systematic presentation enhances credibility. Limitations acknowledgement demonstrates intellectual honesty. What can and cannot be concluded from your findings? What threats to validity should readers consider? Acknowledging limitations actually strengthens credibility by showing sophisticated understanding. Implications and recommendations translate findings into action. What do your results suggest for program improvement, future research, or policy? Help readers understand why your findings matter beyond the specific project. Response rates affect data quality and generalizability. Low response rates raise concerns about whether respondents differ from non-respondents in ways affecting findings. Track response rates and analyze available characteristics of respondents versus non-respondents. Use multiple contact attempts and incentives to maximize response. Consider non-response weighting or sensitivity analyses when response rates are low. Data quality assurance spans the entire data lifecycle from collection through analysis and reporting. Collection quality depends on clear protocols, trained data collectors, and appropriate tools. Develop detailed data collection procedures specifying who collects what data, when, and how. Train all data collectors on protocols and provide ongoing supervision. Use standardized forms and instruments to ensure consistency across collectors and time points. Entry quality requires verification procedures to catch errors. Double entry, where two people independently enter the same data and discrepancies are resolved, catches many errors. Range checks flag impossible values. Consistency checks identify contradictory responses. Cleaning quality involves systematic review and correction of identified problems. Document all changes made during cleaning so the audit trail is preserved. Analysis quality requires checking assumptions, verifying calculations, and having others review code and output. Presenting summative evaluation in proposals requires describing a credible plan for assessing program outcomes even when specific results are unknown. Proposals describe what you will do, not what you found. Evaluation questions should derive from your objectives. For each outcome objective, what evaluation question will determine whether it was achieved? This alignment shows coherent design and ensures you measure what you claim you will accomplish. Design description should specify your approach to outcome assessment. Will you use pre-post design, comparison groups, mixed methods, describe the design and explain why it is appropriate for your context and questions. Measures specification identifies instruments and data sources for each outcome. Are you using validated instruments? Developing custom measures? Accessing administrative data? Provide enough detail that reviewers can assess measurement quality. Analysis plan previews how you will analyze data once collected. What statistical or analytical approaches will you use? Match analysis methods to your design and data type. Timeline should show when baseline, follow-up, and any interim assessments will occur. Timing should be realistic given outcome development and program schedule. Longitudinal data analysis examines change over time and can reveal patterns that cross-sectional analysis misses. Repeated measurement of the same individuals enables tracking individual trajectories rather than relying on aggregate comparisons. Growth curve models describe the shape and rate of change over time. They can test whether change trajectories differ between groups or relate to predictors. Random effects account for the clustering of repeated observations within individuals. Panel data methods control for time-invariant individual characteristics that might confound relationships. By comparing each individual to themselves over time, stable individual differences are controlled even if unmeasured. Survival analysis examines time until an event occurs, such as program dropout or goal attainment. Censoring methods handle cases where events have not yet occurred by the end of observation. Let us summarize the key points from this lesson on summative evaluation. Summative evaluation assesses whether programs achieve intended outcomes, addressing the fundamental question of whether the program works. This judgment orientation provides accountability to funders and stakeholders. Evaluation designs range from basic pre-post approaches to experimental designs with random assignment. Design choice involves trade-offs between rigor and feasibility. Choose the strongest design that is realistic for your context and explain your reasoning. Baseline data establish the starting point for measuring change. Collect baseline before program exposure using measures identical to follow-up assessment. Anticipate baseline challenges and plan accordingly. Outcome data analysis requires appropriate statistical or analytical approaches. Report both statistical significance and effect sizes for quantitative data. Use systematic approaches for qualitative outcome assessment. Reporting findings effectively maximizes the value of your evaluation investment. Organize results clearly, acknowledge limitations honestly, and translate findings into implications for action. In our next lesson, we will explore quantitative methods in depth, examining survey research and other approaches for collecting numerical outcome data.